Okay, the presentation is about CO2 reduction in greenhouses, and it's a field experiment. I will just set the timing. It's a field experiment that happened in southeast part of Latvia. It lasted for a couple of years. And it was a collaboration between a number of partners. We were actually 10 collaborators, 2 universities, University of Latvia, where I belong to, and the Life Sciences University of Latvia, and then some organizations and some commercial companies. We did this in one of the largest greenhouses in Latvia. And why we did it was because we saw the greenhouse as one of the ways in getting fast results in decreasing the CO2 emissions in legacy greenhouses. And also because thermal energy production in Latvia accounts of 65.6% of total greenhouse gas emissions. This is a huge source of greenhouse gas emissions, heating. Why we chose greenhouse? Because there are what we call legacy infrastructure for heating of fossil fuels, and we looked how to adapt it to heat pumps, but the energy storage requirements and but other conversion costs from high CO2 to low or zero CO2 emissions. The structure of a greenhouse in Latvia is outer structure of glass and steel or aluminum. Heating system is essential heating, and the heat source usually was gas or biomass burner. And we wanted to replace it with solar energy and with a heat pump. Obviously, solar energy is out of phase of what greenhouse needs. There are 2 cycles, day-night cycle and cloudy weather versus sunny weather, and also the beginning and the end of the season. All those 3 parts of the cycle we looked at. And of course, we have surplus energy during the summertime. So the goals of the work was to define the energy storage and the limitations for hybrid heating for a greenhouse in Latvia, and estimate impact of air to water heat pump use on CO2 emissions. And we also calculated operating costs comparing natural gas with electricity driven air to water heat pump. Here is the location of the greenhouse we studied. That's how the whole company looked like. This is a big greenhouse, tomato producing greenhouse. And our experimental greenhouse was built to use beef type tomatoes. It was 50 square meters, 2 rows of tomatoes in our experimental greenhouse. And one of the drawbacks was that ventilation system was coupled to industrial greenhouse, which a bit diluted the results, but it was still valid. The energy sources we used Hitachi 10 kilowatt heat power heat pump, 50 kilowatts peak power solar collectors, and 7.5 kilowatt peak power photovoltaic cells. And we used 10 kilowatt hour batteries coupled to PV cells, and also hot water heat accumulator system. And we installed rather advanced temperature sensor system to monitor temperature at different parts of the greenhouse and heating system. That's how our small experimental greenhouse here looks from, we separated it from the main greenhouse. This is the schematic picture, how it was done. This is the hot water accumulator system, also located in the main building. The key contributing factors was what we looked at were solar irradiation was studied, outdoor temperature, electricity price, and indoor 24-hour temperature cycle that we needed to have sustained in our experimental greenhouse. So we looked at all of those factors, also economic performance and also CO2 reduction, to draw conclusions about the area where solar energy together with a reasonable storage system are applicable for greenhouses. This is an example of outdoor temperature graph for different months. Blue is December and the yellow is September. As we see, the temperatures, of course, as expected, declines with the onset of the winter, and there is also daily variations and also variations of weekly scale. 24-hour heating cycle, we could store excess energy in both hot water heat storage system and also in accumulators that accumulates excess solar power and then drives the heat pumps during the nighttime. Heat storage system has somewhat higher coefficient of performance because heat pump coefficient of performance decreases with decreasing outdoor temperature, and the outdoor temperature usually drops during the night. But on the other hand, we need to heat the water to higher temperatures. So the hot water energy storage system was mostly used for solar collectors that can heat water up to 100 degrees. So this is a heat pump coefficient of performance. We calculated for our unit. As we see, the performance is much better at above zero outdoor temperature. This is a very interesting graph. It shows the quite chaotic behavior of what are the requirements for heating water as a function of the outdoor temperature in greenhouse, because there is interplay of different factors like solar irradiation, outdoor temperature, inner greenhouse cycle, etc. And as we see, we cannot draw a single conclusion at what area of heating water temperature as a function of outdoor temperature we should be. It's very interesting, and we should be prepared for all scenarios. Economics. We did our research in 2022, and it was not a reasonable year for doing economic calculations because of the war in Ukraine and energy crisis. So electricity, historically, the highest prices were in the end of 2021, and the gas prices have not reached their peak value during 2021. So therefore, we used assumptions what a reasonable price would be, both for electricity and for gas, natural gas. And as an alternative heating fuel would be biomass, or most probably wood chips that are widely used in Latvia, and I assume in some other countries as well. Our research showed that in September, that is beginning of the end of heating season, in our greenhouse, we saw that heat pump and solar energy combined always beated the fossil fuels economically if we look at the cost of the fuel. And because we used legacy infrastructure, that means legacy heating system, just adding heating power and solar collectors, the total investment also was not that big for this heating system. So this was September. October is different because October is with a lower temperatures, but still it's competitive. However, the energy storage requirements showed that we cannot store enough energy to continue with solar heating, both using photovoltaic cells and solar collectors. We cannot continue beyond September because we exhausted all the energy accumulated during the summertime or during the September time. We didn't have excessive energy storage facilities, which are prohibitively costly. So the energy storage requirements we can do in 24-hour cycle. We need approximately 1 kilowatt per square meter for heat power storage. That is doable, and also 0.2, 0.3 kilowatt hours per square meter for electrical power. That is also doable on economic part. However, for longer cloudy periods, the requirements goes well up, and this is not economically feasible at current costs of energy storage. So the beginning and the end of the season is even more demanding. Here we see what we saw in outdoor temperature and solar irradiation in September, that is end of the season. And as we see, we can observe fluctuations both on a daily basis and also on a weekly basis. There are cloudy periods and sunny periods, and they all have to be covered. And as we see in this picture, the daily energy balances goes into energy deficit starting from the beginning of September. However, accumulated energy balance was sufficient up to end of September. After that, we cannot do it by solar, whatever storage we have. However, we can still heat greenhouse with grid electricity, and we made calculations comparing CO2 emissions associated with natural gas, and we compared it with the CO2 emissions associated with using electricity, and we assume that half of the electricity in Latvia is generated without CO2 emissions and half with natural gas. And what we saw with those assumptions, we got five-fold reduction of CO2 emissions by using air-to-water pump, and twofold cost reduction where we compared actual conditions in the gas and electricity market on actual outdoor temperatures. So basically, that's our conclusions from this research, that we can get significant CO2 reductions and also cost advantages by using air-to-water heat pumps combined with solar power in legacy greenhouse structures. And that's possible future would be to look into interaction of heat pump heating with nuclear energy and renewables to see whether the newly developed nuclear power plant models can deliver also energy for agriculture on economically and technically feasible manner. Okay, thank you.